Hey guys, so what's been happening in the hobby this week? Well, I thought we'd have a little bit of a discussion on conversions and custom paint schemes. You know, it's something, or at least from the paint scheme side of things, I do a lot. I do some conversions, and that's been increasing over the years, but or more so in other years to recently. But you know, today I've got a conversion here for you. So yeah, we're going to discuss that. We're going to go through some of the pros and cons and some of the benefits of getting into custom schemes or conversions, differences between them. And I thought this would be a really great chance to showcase what I'm doing here. So a little while ago we did the I think it was the Pale Flesh hobby tips tutorial for the Vampire here, and I didn't show the full scheme, although I have done this many times on the channel. But when I first bought this model, I was intending to do one that was mounted on a zombie dragon. So I've now done the conversion so we can see it here, and yeah, I'm really excited to get this painted. Now you'll see the zombie dragon at the end. I'm not going to go through the process of showing you that because the zombie dragon's a whole nother issue. We might do a video on how to paint that because it is a tough one. But I will show you how I'm going to paint her, as I haven't shown the full one of her before. So I think that'd be really cool. But yeah, I've done like a sort of, you know, the leg tucked in under her, and she fits nicely onto the seat, which is really cool. But I think it should be really fun, and it's just something that's you know, intrinsic to Warhammer, right? You know, doing these kinds of personalizations, whether it's just a paint scheme or a conversion, is something that's really important to most of us that get into this, and you know, varying degrees, but definitely it's a big aspect of the hobby. So I thought that'd be really fun to have a bit of discussion on that while I paint this lovely lady up, because yeah, I'm really excited to get this done. It's one of those, you know, classic you know, dreams that we all have. It's very classic fantasy style thing, you know, Warhammer Fantasy, to have your lord be on foot and then have the same lord converted on the mount or on the large creature, whatever it is, for whatever army you're doing. It's a very classic Warhammer idea, and I've really wanted to do that with this model. So yeah, let's get started, eh? So where to begin with this little discussion? You know, you've got your conversion side and the painting side. So maybe we'll start with the painting and then we'll move into the conversion stuff. So, you know, I mean, on my channel, you know, I do a lot of this type of custom schemes for armies, etc. And it's something that I really enjoy. And so I guess this is a topic that I'll have maybe a bit more to say. We'll see how we go. But yeah, look, I mean, it's something that I guess it's the easiest way into customization and personalizing your minis. You know, it has a lot of advantages there, and I guess we should go into some of that. You know, I mean, the initial pros of doing your own scheme is that you know, it's very cost effective. You know, you're only having to pick the colors you're going to buy, you know, paints anyway. So just choosing a set that is unique to you or unique to your army instantly gives you personalization without really having to spend more than you normally would. And I think that that's something that's you know, a really valid thing to consider when you're doing an army. You know, you want to theme it around certain ideas, certain units, but there's also the theme of the color scheme, and that can help really give you that personalization without having to then go into the further expense of conversion, which we'll talk about in a second. But I think that's the real big benefit there is, I guess, cost. And then there's also I suppose time. And so with time, you know, you're not really spending any more than you normally would. I mean, unless you're doing something very elaborate, but most color schemes are going to roughly take a similar time frame, unless you, as I said, you're doing something very complex. But the standard sort of I guess battle ready color schemes or general color schemes that you do, regardless of color, is going to roughly take about the same time. Now obviously there are some exceptions, things like really bright yellows, etc., very bright colors like that require more steps in order to get them to really pop. But you know, apart from those particular colors, which can be a bit difficult to use, most color schemes are going to run roughly in the same time frame. So you're saving a lot of time there. You're not having to go to the expense, I guess, and that extra time that comes with doing conversions. So yeah, it's a good place to begin. I think it's the best place to start with when you're thinking about personalization and how you can begin to make the army or the group of figures that you're painting, regardless of system, whether it's a war game or a tabletop or even just a board game set of minis. You know, it gives you a chance to really dig in and start to think about color. So what are some of the benefits of doing that? Well, I mean, the first thing you start to do is you start to think about the colors on the color wheel, and you start to think about their relationships. And this is the first sort of window or gateway or doorway into understanding art theory, and specifically color theory, to do with the relationships of color. And so you start to get the complementary colors, sympathetic colors, etc. You start to look at things like gamut maps, which are basically layering a prismatic shape over the color wheel, and then you paint using the colors that are within that shape. And you'll although I don't refer to that that much on the channel, that's more of an art theory term. But when I talk about limited palettes and using certain colors on the color wheel to create your color scheme, as I do in many of my talks before, my videos, that's the sort of thing you're actually doing. You're doing that kind of map, and so you're limiting the access of colors to a particular spectrum on the color wheel, and then you're deriving your color scheme from that, and you'll get a very harmonious finish doing that way. Other examples of that would be things like, you'll hear YouTubers and different people talk about a mother color, so that all the colors are influenced by that one color. So for all it's usually like a highlight color. So let's say a warm yellow or something, and that's then mixed into all the colors to create a harmony across the color scheme. So there are many ways to do this, but thinking about your color scheme and personalizing it is the first steps to understanding some of these ideas. Warm and cool colors. What goes together, how to contrast colors against each other, etc., how to get more contrast out of your color scheme so that you end up with something that visually looks appealing, both close up and far away. And these are the sorts of questions that you start to drive in your head about how do I resolve this, how do I do this, because you're thinking about colors sort of separately from, let's say, what the law suggests, or what the box art suggests, or the game suggests of whatever given system you're in. And not to say that that's not cool to do the color schemes that are there, because usually companies spend a lot of time thinking about those color schemes to get the best out of them. So they usually do pick good color schemes. Games Workshop's a very good example of this. They pick extremely well thought out color schemes for their ranges, and they really work. So there's nothing wrong with doing the preferred color scheme, or the one that the company showcases for you, because it's usually designed to work. It's very similar to our sporting team colors. They use the same kinds of approaches to color as Warhammer does, right? You look at any famous team and you look at their colors, you'll find blue and yellow together, you'll find green and red together, you'll find a lot of those complementary colors working against each other, or in sympathy with each other, for these teams. And it's the same for Warhammer. So there's a lot of ways. Again, we'll talk about inspiration in a second, but you're getting quite a wide plethora of stimulus there to start to derive your color scheme, and there's a lot of inspiration, as we're going to segue into, to finding those colors, not just from pure art theory itself and people like me online talking about it. So you start to move into things like inspiration, and so you start looking around at artworks, at illustration, comic books, other miniature game systems, other factions and lore and so on, other box art, display painters, etc., other miniature painters online, in person, etc. You start to broaden your horizons and start to look out there and see what other people are doing, and you start to riff on those ideas. You're looking at techniques. What are the best ways for you to achieve the thing that you want to do? A lot of complexity and sort of inspiration, and just all that really good, wholesome art stuff starts to enter your mind, and so this helps you to improve. It's broadening your knowledge base, it's broadening your inspiration base, your creative potential starts to come forward, and things start to unlock, and this expresses itself on the mini, and on your abilities, your techniques, etc. Everything starts to level up. So it's a really great way to start that journey. Not, as I said, you can't do that with just lore-friendly or box art-friendly color schemes, but certainly there's a small amount of autopiloting going on there when you don't have to think about the color scheme. And there's also advantages to that too. I mean, we should also just partially mention that the advantages of sticking to lore. Maybe that's a whole nother video we could do. So, box art and law-friendly color schemes that are made for you by the company that produce it, it takes a lot of the thinking out of it. So if you don't have a lot of time, etc., and you want to get something that looks visually great, then yeah, using law-friendly color schemes is a great way to do that, because you can just get straight in and you've got something to follow, a color scheme to follow, an image to follow, and it's a very good starting place to do that, or if you don't have a lot of time. So definitely that's still in the conversation, but we're just talking more about, I guess, when you have made that choice to personalize, what does that look like for you, and how do you move forward, and what are the some benefits that come from choosing that direction. So yeah, you get a lot of benefits out of this, and even just thinking about it and discussing it, you might decide that, okay, actually what I really want to do is follow the box art, is do the law-friendly thing, and you can still derive a lot of benefits from that. There's absolutely no question that's also a valid pathway to achieving good results and better results. But yeah, the personalized version, custom schemes, that starts to become addictive. As you've seen on my channel, I do it all the time. It's a very fun way to explore color and muck around on the palette there and find those interesting interactions with the paint. I think that's a really satisfying thing, and it can give you a love of painting which you might otherwise not get. It's definitely going to improve your interest in that area. I can't really see that it's not, because you do have to spend a bit of time there and effort to get in. Once you're in, you find this whole new world opens up to you. It's a rainbow, as it were, of color and ideas, and it just expands everything you do in the hobby. So I highly recommend it. It's a fun thing to do, and you can start with a single model, you can start with just a very small thing, a skirmish game. MCP is great for that, even though you might say, oh no, they've got very strong color schemes for those Marvel characters, but you can treat them as a blank canvas, as I've done. You've seen now videos on the channel. We're exploring that more with Shatterpoint. I'll be doing more videos on this, but treating those minis as a blank canvas to explore color, they're actually really good for that. If you can remove yourself from the idea of who they are and what they are, so Wolverine, etc., Magneto, all these characters that are very well known, and just think about them as a blank canvas, everything starts to change about how you actually approach the painting of them, because they've got great, broad, flat areas. It's like a costume, and the costume is very different to lived-in clothing that you might get on a Warhammer mini. It's a different kind of design aesthetic, and it actually lends itself well to doing these kinds of broad painting schemes and blending and so on. It's really good for your skill progression. So that's just some initial thoughts on that, and some pros and cons of the painting side. And now let's take a little bit of a look at the conversion side. So another layer of personalization, or even the first layer of personalization. It depends on the person. Some people will stick to law-friendly color schemes, but they'll really get into the converting of every model and every little aspect of their faction or their army or their collection, etc. And they all become personalized. And it's a great expressive thing. It's a great creative thing to step outside the box, as it were, and find those unique moments in those figures and create your own. Basically, you're sculpting. You're creating your own sculptural artwork, and that's a really beautiful thing. I'm a sculptor. I highly recommend it. It's really great to see that thing finally come together. It's like a little like your own little miniature baby being born. You get this new thing in the world that doesn't exist before. It's very unique. It's a great experience. So I highly recommend that. And and that's something that people that convert and kit bash, etc., they get a lot of enjoyment out of that. And you can assign narratives to these things. You can build stories behind them. They're very unique. And it's a really wonderful part of this miniature hobby generally to be doing those things. It works well in D&D and role play settings, but it also works really well in tabletop gaming systems like Warhammer, etc. You get that chance to really personalize, and so people get a lot of joy out of that. So what are the benefits of that? Well, again, you're expanding your skill set. So once you decide, like for instance, the vampire I've got here, well, I want to put this vampire on the back of a zombie dragon. Well, the model doesn't come, with sort of a very easy way to do that. It has, one side of its body's all covered in robes. It's got one free leg, which is great, but there's a whole area there you're going to have to remodel in some way. So how do you do it? So you get posed these initial problems or stumbling blocks before you can proceed. And so then your mind starts whirring and trying to think about all the possible solutions. Our mind loves this type of thing. Problem solving is something that our mind really loves to do. So when you give yourself a fresh problem to solve, everything starts to light up in your mind, and you start to have all these lovely little ideas start to burst forward. And it's a great feeling, and it's a really invigorating one, because you're getting to, cross that next mountain, that new challenge. And it's a wonderful thing to invigorate your hobby with if you're in a rut, or if you're sort of stuck on something, to give yourself a little manageable project like that, just a single figure, and think about how you can change it up and what you can do. And then the narrative starts to run away with you, and you start to have all these ideas. And if you combine that, let's say, with custom schemes, well, now you've got the full plethora of creative potential coming forward. But we're not going to talk about the merging of those, although that is implied. You're going to do both ultimately, I would say. If you're running down these sorts of I guess more creatively independent roads, then you're probably going to do both. But for the sake of this, we'll just look at the conversion side. And so you're going to start to expand your skill set. You got to be able to sculpt and add two-part epoxies like green stuff, etc., milliput, the Tamiya putty. You might even be using digital sculpting. So you're sculpting on a computer. You're then exporting out STL files, 3D printing parts, and then gluing them onto other things. You might be sculpting whole figures. You might be doing a whole range of composite elements and skill sets to arrive at your final figure. And with the advent of things like 3D printing, this is a great, extra tool at your disposal that you can actually, enjoy and employ here to create that final look. And so there's so much there for you, and then kit bashing as well. So, very traditional way of approaching it, grabbing a couple of kits and then combining them. There's so many good options here to personalize and give yourself something unique that is just, not to be underestimated. And here, right now, I'm getting to live out the dream that all young kids that got into Warhammer Fantasy thought about, having their lord on foot and then having the same model appear on the back of the horse or the creature or the dragon or whatever it was. So you had both. So when you're doing your narrative campaigns, your little campaigns, you can build that story and they level up and they get their new mount and all that sort of thing. It's the equivalent, I guess, of like if any 80s 90s kids remember this, Voltron. It's the equivalent of the kid that owned all the parts to Voltron, and so that was kind of like the king kid. If he or she had that full set, they were highly revered amongst the other children. That's like the ultimate goal, is to have the full Voltron. And so you'd always be begging your parents to try to get you all the pieces so you could have Voltron. And for those that don't know, look it up. If you're too young to know what Voltron is, go look it up. But you'll instantly understand what I'm talking about. It's one of those childhood dreams. And for Warhammer and Warhammer Fantasy, even AOS, to have that one on foot and the one on the mount is such a cool thing. And to finally realize that for yourself in your own army or your own collection is a great bucket list sort of tick. The one of those dreams that you want to fulfill. So I highly recommend it if you're into this stuff to think about that, because it does really satisfy something quite deep inside of you to finally realize that and give yourself that little hobby. I guess, endorphin hit, right? So now just finally we'll discuss, I guess, some of the cons to the conversion side. So we've talked about, cost and time and so on with the painting. So there is definitely a cost there to converting, and there is definitely a time factor there. So it is going to take you longer and it is going to cost you a lot more. And the skill acquisition is going to be slightly slower because there might be a whole range of things you have to learn, not just, let's say, the painting, which is tough in and of itself, but you're not having to use multiple disciplines there to complete that. It's kind of under the one umbrella, the one sort of skill set. Whereas with converting, you might need to sculpt. As I said, you might need to learn digital programs. You might need to learn how to use a 3D printer. You might need to learn how to use two-part epoxies and the best consistencies for different types of sculpting jobs, etc. There's so many different elements there. Different glues, different sort of kits and how they interact with one another. Are using resin, metal, plastic, etc. There's a whole range of issues there that are going going to slow you down, but ultimately you will speed up. But there is that con there of cost. The cost is probably the biggest one. It's going to cost a lot more. You know, these days kits are quite expensive no matter which company you go to, and you're literally doubling, tripling, or even quadrupling the cost of the model just to get it to the way that you want it. So it is definitely something you want to reserve for very specific projects, unless you've got the money to burn. Most of us don't, and we have to, you know, be conservative with what we do, and that's also a healthy thing just for your collection and the amount of grey models sitting there to the amount of painted ones you have, you know, to keep yourself a bit more reserved and keep that painting going and keep things moderate is a great thing to you know, express in your hobby, because it's going to keep things healthier and you know, and keep your mental state in a more positive mind frame, which I think is important too. So just to be buying all the time isn't a great thing. You want to keep that back a little bit and actually finish the projects you start. That's a really wonderful goal to have. You may not always get that done, but the impetus to want to do that, or to at least have that there in the back of your head that you would like to at least finish certain projects, as I've alluded to in the past when it comes to this particular topic, you know, as a creative process, it's not essential to complete everything. You know, artists we're not like robots and, you know, mechanized machines. We don't just like start a thing, finish a thing, start a thing, finish a thing. You know, you are allowed to have things go undone or unfinished. That's important. There's lessons to be learnt there. It's not always about the finished product and the lessons you learn at the end. Sometimes it's got to do with other elements of that journey, and that might lead to a greater realization, a better resolution down the track. So you got to have room for that, you know, unfinished part of your hobby, and don't feel shameful for that, because it's a part of the creative process. If you listen to any great creatives in any field of any discipline, they'll tell you this. It's not about always completing things. It's about the journey, I guess, or the experience of creating. There's a lot more elements to it. It's not a black and white thing. So, you know, but you do sometimes want to, you know, sit down in that chair and pull your finger out, as it were, and just complete something. That's also just as valid as important. So we'll leave that balance of those two things there at the end, because there is no resolution to it. It's an ongoing battle that every creative person, no matter whether you think you're an artist or not, you're in this hobby, you're doing a creative thing, it's always going to be a tension there. But it's good to be lighthearted about it. It's good to be positive about it. It's good to allow yourself the freedom to relax, let things go when they need to go, and, you know, double down and finish something when you feel like it's the right thing to do. And that's a great thing to have, to listen to your intuition and allow that to guide you through this process. So I think I've waffled on long enough on this topic. So it's just some initial ideas and some things to think about when you're doing, either you're thinking about the painting of it or the converting of it, or both, and some of the simple kind of time, cost, and skill acquisition kind of elements that go into these things in completing these projects. But I think now we'll go and see how I've gone with my lovely little vampire on the back of that zombie dragon, and we'll take a look at it all together, and you know, realize that dream, you know, and get that bucket list tick there for having a one on foot and one on the mount, right? That's the ultimate goal. You can tell I'm very excited. So yeah, let's go and take a look and see what my final thoughts are on this. And there we go, one childhood Warhammer Fantasy Battles dream unlocked. Here we go, let's take a look. So we've got the Lord on foot, and now the converted Lord on the mount. So cool, right? It just fits on there. It's, you know, I could probably wiggle it around a bit and get it to sit a bit lower, but I'm happy with this. I think it's pretty cool. Yeah, it's awesome, right? And the, you know, the zombie dragon car are pretty cool too. I'm not sure whether I'll do a tutorial on one of these, because they are really hard. I do have to do a second one, so maybe we'll do a video on the big dragon, but it is a bit of a challenge. So yeah, that's an interesting one. Maybe we could do a video on, you know, tackling something that you don't really want to paint, and go into some you know, maybe some strategies to try to achieve it, because it is a bit of a marathon getting this one done. But yeah, how cool is that? You know, yeah, it's awesome. I'm really happy with the results. I'll leave you some really nice images, you know, front and back, that sort of thing, so you can take a look, you know, and live vicariously through my dream of owning. Here we go, we'll put them together, the one on foot and the one on the mount. Yeah, it's pretty cool. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this. Please hit that like button, subscribe button, it really helps me out. And I guess I'll catch you on the next one.